Hi, everyone, and welcome back to the Organizing to Victory podcast, where we're talking garage politics. My name is Lee Perry, and on today's episode, we have a very special guest named Amanda Marie Green, who's running for Florida's Congressional District 2. This district is in North Florida, and it's in the Panhandle area, which actually encompasses 16 different counties, including Tallahassee and the northeastern part of the state. This is our first Zoom podcast, and we're super excited to highlight her race because it is one of the most flippable opportunities in the state, and she's running on a rural platform to make rural communities really feel seen and heard by addressing support for small farmers, making sure we're bringing in jobs and we're lowering costs, whether it's on property insurance or it's on healthcare. She emphasizes the need to have new, diverse voices running for Congress, and she's super excited as a new young mom who's only 32 to be one of those new voices stepping up to take on the role of running for Congress. So here's my conversation with Amanda Green. All right, everyone. So this is our first Zoom podcast, but it's for a really awesome person. Amanda Marie Green is running for Florida Congressional District 2, which is encompassing like the Tallahassee area, right? I don't know how redistricting played in, and I'm sure we'll talk about that, but I'm super excited to get to know you and get to know, why you're running. So can you tell us a little bit about yourself and where you're from?
Absolutely. Thank you so much for having me on. And thank you so much for having this venue for folks to come and talk about why they're running. I know you've got a lot of folks new to politics coming on the show, and that definitely includes me. So Amanda Marie Green, like you said, I'm running for Congress in Florida's Congressional District 2. It's a really big district. It's 16 counties, and it runs all the way from Walton over to Madison, down to Taylor, up to the Georgia-Alabama border. It is literally the size of the state of Maryland. And so when we talk about, big districts, it's the largest east of the Mississippi. And that means that I spend a lot of my time traveling to really rural parts of the district. We're the most rural district, I believe, on this half of the country. And so a little bit about me. I'm a Navy brat. I was born at Balboa out in California, in San Diego, but I was mostly raised in St. Petersburg in Florida. I, coming from a military family, knew that I would be dedicated to a life of service, but didn't know quite what that looked like because I wasn't sure that I wanted to join the military like my dad and like all of my grandfathers. And so I actually ended up studying at Florida State International Affairs, Public Administration, and Economics, and was recruited by the U.S. Agency for International Development's top contractor to go up to D.C. and go through their operations track. So I specialized in bidding on and then implementing programs that allowed us to intervene, us being Americans, to intervene in famine around the globe, suppress HIV/AIDS and malaria around the globe, and basically do a lot of service for the world's most vulnerable. And I was truly humbled to be able to do that on behalf of the American people and kind of earn that goodwill. And I'd still be doing that today if the Trump administration hadn't decided to dismantle USAID and attack what is arguably one of the most charitable, what was the most charitable agency that the U.S. government ever had in existence.
Wow. So you're one of those direct cases where your life-changing programs that you were a part of administering and overseeing were completely gutted because of fraud, right?
Allegedly because of fraud. And so as someone who specializes in complying with the federal acquisitions regulations, seeing these men come in like Elon Musk and allege fraud, waste, and abuse when they couldn't define for you, most likely, what those individual terms meant or what we were not in compliance with. They came in, the first thing they did was gut the Office of Inspector General. When you take inspector generals out of an agency, you're admitting basically that you're not interested in any real investigation of fraud, waste, and abuse. You're there to take resources for yourself or cover something up. And there's a lot of folks from the industry that know Elon was under investigation. And it's no shocker to any of us that when he was put in that position of power, he went after USAID first.
Do you have any stories of maybe a personal relationship you had with someone that you could see how those dollars directly impacted someone's quality of life?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, a lot of what USAID did was identify strong talent around the globe, and enable local communities to determine what worked best for them. And so a lot of my colleagues were people from communities. It wasn't Americans jetting into a country. What we're talking about is people who were already living in the country. So take, for example, Morocco. I worked in Morocco for a bit on a reading program that specifically helped move the Moroccan government from French learning to Arabic learning. So trying to decolonize a bit the education system and moving from rote memorization to phonetic learning. And I got to work closely with Moroccan educators there, and I was just an auditor on the project. They were doing the actual hard work of moving the curriculum over. But when they talk about, and when you see the looks on kids' faces of getting a book where the kids look like them in the book, and it's the same language that they hear at home, not a colonialized language that they're learning in the classroom, I don't know. I think teaching kids to read is something that everyone can get on board with. And for those who are a little bit more like, well, why would we teach kids to read overseas? If you're also someone who does not want to see the rise of terrorism around the globe, one of the most effective ways to suppress terrorism is to increase literacy, because people who are capable of absorbing new information are less likely to be vulnerable to radicalized agendas and to change their to become extremists. And so that program was really cool, getting to work specifically with teachers who otherwise wouldn't have, and educators who wouldn't have had the resources they need. Some of those folks have gone on to continue in Morocco. Others have gone on to work with the UN and with international education organizations. And it starts with USAID.
That's awesome. So what was the thing that turned on your political light bulb and said, I have to run for Congress? I've had enough.
Yeah, I was sitting under I have a big magnolia tree in my front yard, and I was sitting under it with my dog, who passed away last year. And I talked to him a lot, and I was saying, Bud, what are we going to do? These people don't care about feeding kids around the globe. They don't care about suppressing disease. They don't care about teaching kids to read. What are we going to do? And I couldn't get a hold of my congressman at the time. I'd been spam calling, trying to get a hold of him to explain to him, you're someone who served this country in the military. In theory, you want what's best for this country. I have to believe that in my soul. And I couldn't get a hold of him. And it just really rubbed me the wrong way that we might be experiencing taxation without representation. And that we had a congressman that the more I kind of peeled back the layers, I found out hadn't been home in a long time, because he himself was ill. And so I feel for him, and I don't want anyone to be ill and have that be what prevents them from doing their job. But if you aren't capable of coming back to your district, I don't understand how you can be serving it and representing it. And frankly, a 16 county district needs someone with a lot of energy and capacity to be running all across it all the time.
Well, a 16 county district as well just seems a little bit like a big workload. I'm curious about your thoughts on redistricting, because redistricting historically is supposed to satisfy the need for local representation to be as hyper-local as possible, and looking at population sizes and making sure that things are equitable based on race and income as well, and taking those factors together and trying to make districts that can be represented by someone from the community. It really sounds like your district was gerrymandered beyond belief.
It was gerrymandered 10 years ago beyond belief, actually. So our district was gerrymandered very heavily to suppress Black voices in 2020. And then before that, they suppressed the voices in Tallahassee in 2015. So there's been so much gerrymandering to this district, District 2 specifically, that when they redrew the maps this year, they actually couldn't go anywhere. There was nowhere left to go. So the groundwork that we've been laying down for the last 10 months, it's the exact same map, which is really helpful for folks in North Florida. Anyone in districts 1 through 6 didn't see anything change because they already came for our seats. 5 years ago, 10 years ago. And so, Central and Southern Florida are grappling with that extremist gerrymandering, but in North Florida, we're no stranger to it. And we know that the odds are still in our favor, even with the gerrymandering they did historically.
Well, I love the idea of someone who recognizes the cost of that gerrymandering running. Do you have ideas of how to fight gerrymandering in the future and increasing voting rights?
Yeah, there's a few things that need to happen. There's already some solid acts that have been proposed but need to actually move through the House of Reps and the Senate, like the John C. Lewis Voting Advancement Act. But more than anything, I think as just a moment of reflection for our generation, one of the things that's really hard for me to grapple with on the campaign trail, I'm 32. I am getting involved in politics for the first time in my life. I've been very active in humanitarian aid and international development and like helping people, but I was never helping people through politics. And one of the ways that they ensure that our voices are suppressed is by suppressing our vote, right? I've always been an active voter. I've never missed an election. So saying I'm new to politics, not new to participating in our democracy. One of the things, though, that's really frustrating is the amount of apathy that I see with our generation and with younger generations, because folks feel like their vote doesn't matter because they've been gerrymandered to hell. Well, guess what? It really won't matter if we still don't come out and vote. And one of the things that's really hard for me, I get all this data and statistics and who's going to decide the primary and who's going to decide the general. And if we see the same level of apathy in this election that we have in historic ones, literally 45% of the vote for my district is going to come from people over the age of 59. Mm-hmm. That's crazy. Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. And that isn't conducive to coming up with creative solutions to solving gerrymandering and coming up with creative solutions to the economic problems that our country has. If we continue to have the same folks deciding election outcomes and then the same representatives, Democrat or Republican, I'm going to get a lot of flack from Democratic leadership once I get there. But like, if we have the same folks coming up with the same tired, stale solutions, we're never going to move the needle forward. And the reality is partisan gerrymandering isn't met well by Democrats or Republicans. So no one wants it. And it's just this kind of volatile game that's being played. And I think truly, if we had a fresh Congress, we could come up with a solution that everyone's excited about.
I mean, I don't really get along with everybody in my party either. And I'm also a political consultant. That's a recurring theme that happens on this particular podcast. But we have to challenge the status quo because voters are kind of exhausted. They're exhausted of hearing the same hollow talking points, and they need, that fresh voice with new ideas and a really strong agenda. You're young and you have energy, and I'd love to hear what are some of the bullet points on your agenda that you think would attract those young voters to come to the voting booth?
The thing that kind of breaks my heart about my district is it's really simple and it's really basic. This district is hungry. Like literally hungry, not hungry for a new politician. This district is hungry for food. We have 1 in 4 families dependent on SNAP to put food on the table, right? We have less access to rural health care today than we did 10 years ago. FEMA response in this district has been embarrassing. And that's not a Republican or a Democrat thing. That's just FEMA being underfunded and poor planning, frankly. And so for this district, what we're pushing is that, yes, equal rights for everyone. We need nonpartisan maps, and we need everyone to have opportunity. But we have to get back to basics, and we have to feed people, and kids are hungry. And Florida is one of those places that suppresses the public school system significantly by siphoning a bunch of public funding to private schools. Like, Florida needs a back to basics Democrat, someone who is focused on listening to the people and listening particularly to rural communities who feel like the Democratic Party has kind of left them behind. There's this elitist agenda. I don't know that that's actually what's in people's hearts, but the Democrat elite or whatever. But I do know that there's an economic divide. And so having a representative who comes from a far more humble background than any other politician that I'm aware of who's running in this district, I think it's helpful. Someone who understands that struggle. I was in Florida, there's a program called Florida Healthy Kids. It's a way for parents to bridge the gap. It's a socialized healthcare option. I was on Florida Healthy Kids as a kid. My husband was in Head Start. Like, people who understand the value of these government programs, talking to folks who out of one side of their mouths say they want less government programs, but frankly need those government programs to get by. If we're just talking about the basics of what the government is supposed to be doing to serve people, we'll get more folks coming out and voting. And so our platform is really, really simple. Donald Trump ran on affordability. He's losing on affordability. If we dig into affordability in one of the poorest districts in the country, even though it's an R+8 on the PVI Cook Index, we're quite confident that people will come over to our side and they'll put their politics and things aside in favor of someone who cares. The last thing I'll say, I apologize, it was a bit of a rant. I've also spent a lot of my time talking to farmers in this district. Farmers used to go Democrat all the time, and we've lost them as a party. And farmers, particularly small farmers, not big industrialized farmers, but like small family farms, that's who's feeding folks locally. And they've been forgotten by this government and this administration. They have made diesel incredibly expensive because of tariffs. They have no idea how many seeds to sow, and what they're going to be capable of exporting or importing. The absolute attack on immigrants has obliterated the labor market. And what I hear all the time from farmers is, well, I didn't know they were going to go after the good ones. It's very infuriating to hear, frankly, but I'm glad folks are waking up and realizing, yeah, you didn't want immigration to be addressed this way, this inhumane, awful way. And so one of the things I promised to folks in rural communities is that I'll sit on the Ag Committee as a Democrat. There is not a single Democrat in the state of Florida on the Ag Committee in the House. And the beautiful thing about that is it means I'll be able to support farmers and earn the votes from rural communities, but also the Farm Bill, which runs through the Ag Committee, is what funds SNAP. And right now, because of the big, beautiful bill, SNAP is underfunded at about $187 billion over the next decade. So by making that promise to rural communities, I'm able to do two things, which is address the issues that they have as farmers, but also support everyone in my community by making sure I can be part of a push to fully fund SNAP over the next decade. I'm terrified that my district will be even hungrier.
Yeah, and I think it's another one of those talking points that's trying to put the guilt and the focus on the individual family for not working enough, not working hard enough, not pulling themselves up by their bootstraps and trying to attach these rigorous work requirements and other things when right now they're not admitting that the cost of groceries have gone up by like 14% in the course of just a few months. I mean, and
the 14%, I don't even know. I would argue it's closer to 40 with what I see on the shelves of what people are really buying, beef, carrots, celery, lettuce, rice. Like we're talking about food staple basics are through the roof. And at the same time that we're defunding public schools where kids are learning practical skill sets like, things like home ec, we're taking away the opportunity for kids to learn things, and we're taking away the food that they need. And so I don't know, I genuinely don't know what the plan is with this government for the next generation. You can't treat this government like a business and a business that you're trying to liquidate. You know what I mean?
Right.
This has to be here for the next generation.
They're just trying to get rich themselves as quickly as possible and close the door behind them. And I think that's really, really terrifying because we're seeing the impact of the policies that this administration is putting forward now in a great scale. But I know that we haven't even seen the domino effects that are coming. And I think that is the scarier part is even if we win, even if we build, there's going to be other ramifications that are going to impact our economy and impact these jobs and these farmers. And when you brought up, gutting FEMA and leaving, people behind, your area was hit by Michael and Milton in probably the worst concentration of, we can't compare, but one of the worst concentrations of damage was in your area over the past several hurricanes that we've had in Florida. I'm curious, when you bring up FEMA, farmers are also left behind. If they lose their entire crop in the course of one night, that's all of their livelihood. And where does the government step in to say, hey, we need to coalesce around these groups. I feel like they're left stranded to figure things out on their own.
They are. And there's things like crop insurers who can be helpful, but rates are skyrocketing. And a lot of the insurance companies, I mean, it's the same thing we see with homeowners insurance, and car insurance and health insurance. These insurers are making huge profits at the same time that they're doing record rejections for very reasonable claims. And so a lot of whether or not you have coverage comes down to how much you can fight. And the same is no different. From what I've heard from crop insurance. The other thing that's really scary right now with this government and for this district, Florida's got the worst drought we've had in 27 years ongoing right now. And one of the things that FEMA is oftentimes doing and is responsible for and coordinates with the U.S. Forest Service is the pickup of downed trees after a hurricane. Because if you start to have a forest fire, all of those downed trees are just kindling for forest fires to spread. And the Trump administration dismantled the U.S. Forest Service 2 months ago at the very beginning of fire season, wildfire season. And it would be laughable if this was like not real life. Do you know what I mean? It would seem
like a joke. Like how can you make fun of California after the Palisades fire and say they just needed to do a better job of cleaning up their forests and then turn around and gut that service? You know, it's laughable if it wasn't so terrifying. And like you brought up insurance, the cost of insurance for everything is going up. Yep. And it's leaving people, especially seniors, to have to choose between whether or not they're going to continue to pay for their home and stay where they're living or, end up on the streets.
Yeah, no, I think the last statistic I saw was 53% of seniors in Florida are deciding between medicine and food right now. 53% are making hard decisions about whether or not to fill their prescriptions and fill all of them or buy, I think it was whole produce was the alternative. And that's ridiculous in the wealthiest country in the world. I mean, and it all comes down to not wanting to tax billionaires and corporations who have a lot of our current politicians in their pockets. I think if you don't live in the real world and in our regular society, you don't actually have an incentive to invest in it. I want to pay appropriate taxes that allow my child to go to public school and be a product of public schools just like I was, I want to pay taxes to ensure that no child in his classroom is hungry and no grandparent of any child in his classroom is hungry. One of the other SNAP things that they did that just infuriates me is they lowered the amount you get for kids over the age of 14. I don't know if you've ever tried to feed a 14 to 18-year-old, but the amount that those kids eat is just different, right? They're going through growth spurts at that age. So to decrease the eligible funding for parents with kids at those age, it's inhumane. And I think it's going to be to the huge detriment of Republicans this cycle.
Mm-hmm. I know we have a few more minutes. I know healthcare is on the top of everyone's list to address. Everybody has different ways of going about talking about healthcare. I'm curious, what are your stances, especially given the crisis right now, like you brought up, that seniors are having to choose between their medications and just the cost of living?
We have to address healthcare holistically. And one of the things that I'll commend Republicans on doing was having Project 2025 and having this step-by-step plan. And even though I disagree vehemently with the entire plan, essentially, they got 65% of it done in a year. Democrats this next cycle need to come in and have a strong plan for how we're going to move the needle forward and then stick to it, just step after step. And the outcome has to be a very huge leap towards a single payer system for healthcare. I think there's a few ways that we can move the needle forward very quickly that if we do it in lockstep is kind of this coming from the fringes. And so one of the things I talk about with folks all the time that I think is a needle mover that Democrats need to lean into harder is VA expansion. The VA, Veterans Affairs, is a socialized healthcare service that we have specifically to serve those who have served this country. The VA does not offer as many services as it could to all retired service folks. And it also doesn't extend always to families. And so if we were to expand, for example, VA services, the VA costs so much less than privatized healthcare, and Republicans have a hard time pushing back on it. And so if we talk about Medicare, Medicaid expansion, VA expansion, and we look at holding insurers accountable for the profiteering that we're seeing and the use of AI to reject claims, if we can do all of it very quickly over the next couple years, and come up with what that sustainable plan is for a single payer system, I think the American people would benefit greatly.
Well, I know there's so much going on right now. I mean, there's wars in Iran that are extremely expensive. There's gun violence running rampant all across our country. Are there any other, maybe not in your top three, but any other things that you really want to elevate that you think are unique ideas that are important integral to your campaign?
I think the other unique ideas that we have on this campaign is really in everyone's welcome and a rural focus. Democrats seem bewildered by the fact that they've lost a lot of the country. And I think some of it comes down to we think so hard about the perfect solution to things that we don't move the needle forward when we have power. And so I will be, like all politicians and electeds, I will be imperfect, but I will be very passionate about moving the needle forward for people in my community. And I think that that's not necessarily an issue, but I think it's a behavior or a stance. I think the other thing just on the issue of the next generation, I'm a new mom, and from my perspective, we have a lot of congresspeople who are not going to have to deal with the repercussions of their votes. Yeah. And my son is going to have to deal with the repercussions of my votes. And I hope one day that he lives in a world where it's, that he wants to have kids, frankly. I know it's a hard thing to decide to bring kids into this world right now. And right now I was just endorsed by the only Democrat who's held this seat for longer than a term, former Congressman Alan Boyd. He's 82 years old, and he was recently interviewed on the news. And the first question he was asked is, why aren't you running again, Alan? Because people genuinely ask 82-year-olds why they're not running again. And I just wish more people thought like him. And he said, my district deserves better than an 82-year-old running for another seat. And it's my job not to find someone who agrees with me on everything politically. Alan's an old blue dog Democrat. We don't agree on all the policies of how to move forward, but he wanted to find someone who was young, who had integrity, and who had energy, and who he trusted would vote their conscience. And so I guess my only other thing with this campaign is everyone is welcome under this tent. I am not ageist in attempting to keep older generations out of this campaign. I rely heavily on them for mentorship and support. But as much as I can call on older Dems around the country to do the same, find talent in your district and support them. And folks who have no political experience are incredibly capable of listening and serving, and show them how to do it. Holding on to power is how we will lose it and how we will jeopardize the quality of this country for the next generation.
Beautiful. I do ask every person that comes on the podcast a really important question, which is running on the campaign trail, being a new mom. What do you do to replenish yourself so that you can wake up to fight tomorrow?
I have to credit my husband with creating the space for me to do this. My husband has I'm Amanda Green, but my husband is the one with the green thumb. And we have a vegetable garden that also helps us with offsetting costs in our own home. And my favorite thing to do at the end of the day, whether it was a call day or events or volunteer coordination, is to go outside with my baby on my hip, barefoot, and pick tomatoes out of the garden and stare into the abyss. So I don't know. I don't know if that's a good answer, but that is my favorite way to unwind on this campaign trail and to stay literally grounded.
I always tell people, I don't care what religion you are, if you're non-religious, when you have a relationship with the earth, it feels like a spiritual experience. And so I really do appreciate that response. And in our last few minutes here, can you just tell people how they can get involved with your campaign and donate and volunteer?
Absolutely. So AMG Amanda Marie Green for Congress, FOR, for Congress.com is the best way to sign up online. We have really held back on asking folks to do a whole lot until we hit qualifying. We're qualifying. And so we're really excited about this next step, which is essentially now we'll start door knocking this summer. I apologize in advance, folks. It is summer in Florida and our primary is in August. And so the timing is awful, but volunteering with us always means that you are welcome in my home. There is always pizza. There's always a baby or a dog to hold or soothe. And we've got a lot of work to do, frankly. There's a lot of phone calls. There's going to be a lot of getting out the vote, frankly, and telling folks what the platform is, that there is a Democrat who's a fighter on the ticket, who's willing to meet with anyone and listen to anyone. We are really excited, and we're also seeing some solid signs that this district will flip. And so we just have to be ready for it with a scalable platform. And with the volunteers who have been with us since the beginning, thank you. I am proud of what we've done, but I'm also sorry about how crazy I think it's about to get. And more help is coming.
Well, you don't need to apologize, because when you have a strong message that inspires hope, people are excited to sweat and knock and even bleed, falling down, picking yourself back up for a campaign, because they know that you're making a great sacrifice. Being in elected office is not easy. You don't get to take a lot of vacations and you miss things that are very important to your family, but you're doing it for the greater good. So even though I haven't met your volunteers, being someone who's also doing this professionally, thank you for your sacrifice for all of us.
And thank you for doing it, and for doing it longer than me. I'm sorry it took what felt like world-ending insanity in this country for me to jump in finally and do something myself. But thank you for being here for far longer.
Well, thank you. Any last closing call to actions or inspirational words?
Even if your congressperson doesn't answer, keep calling them. They deserve to know that you're watching and you're listening and you're thinking. And if you're trying to identify and find someone in your district who is doing something differently, go on Ballotpedia and look at everyone's platforms and see who is running a campaign that you're excited about. Just because someone doesn't have the most money or hasn't been in the longest or isn't an incumbent doesn't mean they're not someone to put their weight behind, no matter what the outcome of this election is. And be sure, I plan to win this election, and we plan to do a lot with the responsibility that includes. But no matter what the outcome of the election is, I've learned so much on this campaign trail. A good candidate is never going to go anywhere. There's a lot of work to do no matter what happens. And so find someone who's doing that work already in your district and help them. Thank you for helping them in advance.
Thank you so much. We wish you the best of luck, and we will be blasting this podcast out to hopefully recruit some donations and some volunteers for you. So
thank you.
Thank you.
Appreciate you.
Have a great day. Thank you all for watching. Thank you so much for watching. If you like what you heard today, please comment, subscribe, and share. And visit organizingtovictory.com so that you can learn more about all the ways that we're going to be organizing this year. It is the most important election year of our lives. I know you hear that all the time, but we here at Organizing to Victory hope to not just talk about the issues, but to organize around the issues. So please share, subscribe, and follow us. And we'll see you on the next one. Thank you.